Steve and Tyler write the lyrics to Walk This Way on the wall of a stairwell?
Was a random pizza delivery guy really responsible for the piano on Bachman-Turner Overdrive's Takin Care of Business?
Hey everybody, this is Big Randy with the Smarts Project. I've provided security and transportation for some of the biggest names in the music industry.
I'm John. I've been a musician for over 20 years, playing everything from metal and punk to bluegrass and country.
We're bringing you a podcast about some of the weirdest myths and legends that the music industry has to offer. This is Tall Tales and Music Mythology. Hey everybody, this is Big Randy with the Smarts Project. Welcome to the podcast. And now Seesaw Swinging with the boys in the school, Mr. Jonathan Glove.
Hello everybody.
So, in the music news, you're going to love this one. Alice Cooper has been cast as King Herod in NBC's Jesus Christ Superstar Live.
Nice.
You've thought about it, you've dreamt it, but yes, folks, it's finally happened. Rock and roll icon Alice Cooper has been cast as King Herod in NBC's staged rock concert of Jesus Christ Superstar Live.
I wonder if he's going to sing No More Mr. Nice Guy when he's talking about killing all the firstborn.
I always thought he'd be like a really good heat miser. Like bringing it to the next level.
Nice.
You know?
That's funny.
That was just a short one, but this one I really kind of dug. New Jimi Hendrix LP unearths 10 previously unheard recordings.
Oh, interesting.
10 previously unreleased Jimi Hendrix recordings highlight both sides of the sky, an upcoming posthumous LP, and the legend of the legendary artist. An album will be available March 9th, 2018 via Sony Legacy Recordings on multiple formats, including CD, digital, and a numbered 180-gram audiophile double vinyl.
I did see something about that because there was an article on Reverb, a website that is for mostly selling music gear, was talking about some, I forget which song it was, like an alternate take that just kind of was released recently, and I think it was related to that.
Oh, I'll be darned.
I don't remember what song it was, though, but whatever.
The 13-track album compiles material recorded between 1968 and January 68 and February of 1970. It's the third and final installment in a trilogy series of unissued archival recordings following 2010's Valleys of Neptune and 2013's People, Hell, and Angels.
Huh. Interesting.
Engineer Eddie Kramer, who worked on every Hendrix project before the guitar legend's death, co-produced the album with John McDermott and Hendrix's sister, Janie Hendrix.
Oh, nice, nice.
So, okay, so my story today is, this is like a long, for old people like me, this is like a long-heard rumor about the lyrics to Walk This Way was written on the wall of a stairwell, which, you know, I hate to be a pisser, but it's true and it's not true.
Gotcha.
But have you ever heard it?
No, I actually had not heard that before. I've heard a lot of stories about Aerosmith.
Well, you know, as
most of them usually aren't very tame.
Well, yeah, I have to say that, you know, in the music world, or at least in the security world for music, there's a handful of acts that if you worked for them, you were kind of baptized in fire.
Oh,
you know,
yeah. I'm sure if you were working for Aerosmith during the Toxic Twin days.
Yeah, and I worked for them post Toxic Twins.
Right. So like we talked about this before. Was it Living on the Edge or was it
Get a Grip?
Get a Grip. Okay,
yeah,
gotcha.
So and I got really nothing but good stuff to say.
That's good to hear.
I didn't really have a whole lot of interaction with anybody really other than Joe.
Oh, cool. That's who I'd want to have.
Yeah,
interaction. Yeah.
There was a, you know, you have your run-ins every once in a while, but there's so many other people other than the band. You know, you got the guys in the band, and that's generally what people think about. But then you got the tour manager. Well, then you got the band manager. Then you got roadies, and you got security, and you got all the, you know. So there's the band is just really like a small part of that whole machine. You know?
Right, exactly. There was a guy I knew who was a tour manager for a hardcore band from San Diego that would always tour through Indiana, and so I used to interact with him.
Yeah, this usually whenever, and I mean, I guess it's understandable, but most people that just normal folks off the street, that's all they think about is the band. They don't think of, the 150 people that are working to get that one moment set up.
And especially for a band the size of Aerosmith.
Oh, yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, it's different for just, some small little punk band as opposed to Aerosmith. Oh, sure. That's a huge, well-oiled machine.
There's one, I don't even really know how to describe it. Whenever I first started working around people like that, you get kind of, you get an image in your head of what you think, you set the expectation in your mind of what you think it's going to be like. And then you meet that person or you meet that band and you're like, oh, shit, they're just normal people,
exactly.
or oh shit, they're crazy, or whatever, so then you kind of see a little bit more depth than you do of what you gathered from them in an interview you've seen or a picture or whatever, Right. But to me, the thing that was really the downer was whenever I started reading like the writers.
Yeah.
Because the very first tour I ever went on was Get a Grip tour. That was the very first one.
Yeah, you've told me that before. Yeah. It's crazy.
And if you're going to get baptized in fire, boy, that's the way to do it. Start off with something big. But, you start... And those guys are great. I mean, they've seen it all, done it all. You can't even... None of us...
Wrote a book about it.
Yeah. None of us have the imagination to even dream of shit that they haven't experienced at least a dozen times.
Right.
So, but, my experience with them was, really pretty pleasant for the most part.
Good.
But whenever I first started seeing things like The Rider, really The Rider has very little to do with them. It's more like... what the management says that they want or whatever, and then you start reading the writer and you're like, oh, these guys are picky guys, like you got to have this kind of water and you got to have this. Well, they most of the time they don't really care, it's what other people say that they want. But anyway, that was kind of like one of those oh shit moments, like oh, these guys are weird. So after initially releasing the song in 1975 as a single to the third album, Toys from the Attic, Aerosmith re-released Walk This Way as a single upon the release of the fourth album, Rocks, in 1976, and it became a top 10 hit. The song had a very unusual origin, at least in part based on the strange ways that the group used to work back in the early days. In the early days, Aerosmith was a band that was fueled by drugs, alcohol, and the clashing egos of lead singer Steven Tyler and lead guitarist Joe Perry.
That's a cocaine, man.
Oh, man. The stories. I never heard them talk about it other than in interviews, like if I was standing on the sidelines or something.
Oh, yeah.
Those guys never talked about it in real life.
Oh, I'm sure they didn't. Yeah, especially once they got sober.
That's what I'm talking about. Yeah, because I met them post-Toxic Twins.
Right, exactly.
The pair's relationship was so messed up at the time that they were dubbed the Toxic Twins. Yeah. The animosity between the two men who were friends, they were just friends who were in a suddenly huge rock group that were high and or drunk most of the time, played into how Walk This Way was written. While performing in Hawaii, where they were opening for the Guess Who in late 1974, Joe Perry worked out the famous guitar riff for Walk This Way, which is classic.
Our episodes tie together then. That's interesting.
Oh, right?
Yeah.
So the song did not have a title at the time, just a riff. Perry then worked out a bridge and had the basic framework for the song. Tyler came on stage and jammed with Perry, just using nonsense words to punctuate the song, which he has that jazz. What do you call that thing? Scatting. Yeah. Boy, he could do that shit like David Lee Roth, man. Jeez. So in early 1975, the group was in New York recording Toys in the Attic, and they decided to give Perry's song a shot. There are two different versions of how they got the name Walk This Way, and I would love to hear there's actually two versions of the song too, and I think I have it a little bit later on.
So this was the first Aerosmith song I ever heard.
Oh, is that right? Most of the group agrees that it was from the then recent film Young Frankenstein, and a hilarious scene where Marty Douglas, playing Igor, tells Dr. Frankenstein, Gene Wilder, to walk this way, and Frankenstein follows him, mimicking Igor's limp. Which I got to tell you, my dad, which was one of the most down-to-earth guys, never got into, movies and anything that was fads or anything like that. Man laughed his ass off at that movie. And you remember whenever he picked him up from the train station and he threw him in the back of the hay thing, and the wolves were doing their thing, and Gene Wilder sits up and he goes, werewolf, and he goes, there wolf. My dad thought that shit was funny.
You remember the episode we had with Jason on here as our guest host?
Oh yeah,
the rough night we both had.
Yeah, that was a tough one.
We were watching Young Frankenstein.
Oh no, kidding, Derek!
I hadn't seen it in a long time. I watched it as a kid, and I think I've watched it one other time.
Still holds up.
Oh, it's a great movie. Absolutely.
Tyler said it was a reference to the Three Stooges. I think the other guy's version sounds more believable, though.
Yeah.
In any event, Tyler was tasked with writing the lyrics to the song, which now had a name. Tyler went to his hotel room to do so. When he returned to the studio, he explained to the group that he had written the lyrics, but left them in the cab on the way to the studio, and now he didn't remember them. Naturally, Joe and the rest of the group did not believe him, because apparently Steven was like a little shit-tard back in the day.
Now, see, that's the story I'd heard about Sweet Emotion.
Oh, really?
Yeah, was that he said he'd left the lyrics in the cab.
Well,
interesting.
Steven apparently was like a little shit-tard, like early on. Like he was, like he had little sticky fingers. He would steal shit, and he would always like lying about shit. Yeah. So, his.
I was going to say just the shit tons of cocaine he was doing probably made them not want to.
I'm sure that might have had a little bit to do with it.
And he mentioned it in the story that I heard, because he even said, "I promise I wasn't high."
Not this time,
Not
really.
This time.
So the group did not believe him, and he knew that they didn't believe him, which irked the hell out of him.
Right.
So it led to an argument. He eventually grabbed a couple of pencils and stormed off to go write the lyrics. However, he had forgotten to take paper with him, and since he made a big deal out of storming off, he didn't want to go back in and ask for paper. Yeah. So he just wrote the lyrics on the wall of a stairwell in the studio. But when he finished, he then went to go get a legal pad to transcribe the lyrics, and his song was born. Amusingly enough, there was one last argument about the song. Perry wanted Tyler to record the lyrics first so that Joe Perry could gear his guitar playing around the lyrics.
Makes sense.
Stephen wanted Joe to record the guitar first so that Stephen could gear his vocals around Perry's guitar playing.
Right.
Joe Perry won.
So he made Stephen sing first without
right,
the guitar?
So he could put the guitar around it. Yeah. Now I'll tell you that there's a lot of stories, like you hear on people like this. These guys been together for 44 years.
Right.
So, their history goes back farther and deeper than almost every other band on the planet.
Right.
So whenever all these guys started out, of course, there's drugs and alcohol and sex and blah, blah, blah.
Yeah.
That was back in the day.
Right.
It was a cross between that's the way it was back then and that was them,
Right.
However, there was so many stories that I ran across, like, did you ever hear the time about Steven Tyler stealing $2,000 and the Mexican mob came after him?
What? No.
Yeah, they were going to
That's
execute
crazy.
them.
Holy shit.
Yeah, and there was this guy that worked for them, that he came in with a sword, and he was, like he brought a knife to a gunfight. Yeah. But he just broke in, and he was like, you got 2 seconds to kill me, and the cops are on the way, so you better make it good. And he's holding the sword up the whole time. Yeah.
What the hell?
Yeah, so obviously things went their way and they made it out. But
yeah.
A couple of facts that I found that was really cool. Never heard this one. Steven Tyler was contacted by Led Zeppelin's Jimmy Page in 2008 with an offer to form a band with ex-Zeppelin members Jimmy Page and John Paul Jones, as well as John Bonham's son Jason. The quartet rehearsed once, but, quote, I soon realized it wasn't going to work, writes Tyler. Not that I couldn't sing the stuff. I could sing Led Zeppelin in my sleep, but I wasn't Robert Plant, and Robert wasn't anything like me.
No.
Fans want to hear Percy, apparently that's his nickname, Didn't know that.
Who's
Robert Plant?
Percy?
Yeah.
I've never heard that either, and I was a huge
Yeah,
Zeppelin fan.
that's the way I was. I was like, no shit.
hell?
Wow. That's got to be like what was insider thing. But fans want to hear Percy wail on Whole Lot of Love. Communication broke down, etc. It never would have been the same.
I love Communication Breakdown. It's one of my favorite Zeppelin songs. It's interesting there, too. John Paul Jones, the bassist from Zeppelin, did actually form a super group with Dave Grohl and Josh Homme. Them Crooked Vultures. Yeah, really good shit.
Do they actually do something, or was it like a one-off?
They did a whole album and a tour. And Dave Grohl, I've mentioned this before, I know at some point, Dave Grohl has hinted that they might do another album.
Wow. Joe plays guitar backwards. Did you know that?
How so?
Joe was left-handed, but when he got his first guitar at the age of 12, it came with an instructional record for the righties. Not knowing any better, Perry learned to play guitar by listening to that record, and he played right-handed ever since. Aerosmith's career was in trouble after the flop of the 1985 album Done with Mirrors, but they play... Oh, this is... I'm sorry.
So he doesn't... So
he's left-handed, but he plays right-handed.
Okay, and so he learned right-handed on a right-handed guitar?
Yeah, on a right-handed guitar.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
I thought you meant... Because there's a lot of guitarists who are left-handed who learn to play guitar literally backwards.
Upside down, like Jimi Hendrix.
Yeah, exactly.
Right.
And there's been several guitarists who have done that. So I thought that's maybe what you meant. I was like, well, I've seen him holding a guitar, and it's definitely a right-handed guitar.
Did you ever see the guitar that Slash gave him?
No.
There was a guitar.
Slash gave Joe Perry a guitar and not vice versa?
Dude, it's deep.
That's odd.
There are two guitars. One of them is a 59 Les Paul. It's worth like $750,000.
58 and 59 are the two holy grail years of Les Paul.
Yeah, so Joe had
Jimmy
one.
Page used one of each.
Yeah, so Joe had one, and apparently just before they got back in to things, before the Run DMC era.
Okay.
They had Christmas was coming around. He said he needed some money. You know, they were still Toxic Twins at that point.
Yeah.
And so he ended up selling it. And he didn't want to do it, but that was the most valuable guitar he had, and he knew that he could get some money for it.
Yeah.
So he ended up selling to like some dealer or some shit like that. So years later, he has his 50th birthday.
Yeah.
Well, years later, just before that, he found that some guy came up and he says, "I found your 59 Les Paul." And he goes, "Great, where's it at?" And he goes, "Slash has it." So, of course, these guys know each other. He calls up Slash and he has Slash, and Slash is like, "Bro, please don't ask me that, man." You know, he's like, "No, I'll pay you whatever you want for. I'll pay you double, whatever you paid. You know, it's cool."
Holy shit.
And he's like, "Bro, please, come on, not that one."
Yeah,
man, you
no.
know? So at Joe Perry's 50th birthday, they had a concert, and there was a tech guy that came. Slash was playing with them.
Yeah.
You know, had a whole bunch of big names on stage.
Yeah.
And there was a tech guy that came out, and he handed him the 59. And so he played it, and that was Slash's gift to him.
I was at a place in Nashville, a music store there, and they had, I think it was a 59 Les Paul, some classic one. They had a price tag on it that was several $100,000.
Oh, jeez.
But I would love to play one just to see what all the hoopla is about, because supposedly it's just a marriage of like the way that they were potting the pickups, or not potting, but the way that they were setting the magnets in the pickups.
Oh,
and
right.
The way that the wood that the body and neck were made out of, and just all sorts of other stuff like that. Kind of.
There is the other one is I don't exactly know what it is. I mean, somebody like you could look at it and go, "Oh, that's whatever this is." To me, it looks like a Gibson hollow body. It's white, and he's got, I want to say, like his wife's face airbrushed on it.
Really?
It's
like on the
gorgeous.
fretboard or on the guitar itself?
On the guitar, on the body.
Okay, so it has...
On the front, not on the back, but on the front.
So it has like the F-holes, the cutouts in it?
It's white.
Huh. I wonder if it's I could look it up. It's probably like an ES335 or something.
It's gorgeous, though. And I mean, it has a female's face airbrush on it, and it kind of looks... What's his wife's name? Billy? I think his wife's name is Billy. I think it's her face that's on it, but I could be wrong about that.
I'll check that out in the break.
Aerosmith's career was in trouble after the flop of the 1985 album Done with Mirrors, but they played a major comeback with an unlike a rap rock collaboration. Producer Rick Rubin called Perry with the revolutionary idea of remaking Aerosmith's classic Walk This Way with Run DMC. Joe Perry, whose son Aaron was a rap fan, was open to the idea. The eventual collaboration became the first hip-hop song to crack Billboard's top 5 and relaunch Aerosmith's career.
Nice.
And I'll tell you that was the first time I ever heard of Aerosmith in my life.
Oh, really? No kidding.
Never knew them before.
I wasn't sure if you did. I mean, because you grew up in that era, so I wasn't sure if you knew of them.
Yeah, but I liked old country and old rock.
Yeah.
Like maybe a generation before these. Well, I don't know. Maybe Allman Brothers. Things like that. A little bit of that, but mainly old country.
Gotcha. Yeah.
But I never really was digging them too much. Like I'm sure I've heard it at one time or another.
Yeah.
But whenever those guys did Walk This Way with Run DMC, and the first day that I heard rap, I was ass deep in it. I was like, this is it. And first time I heard that and I saw the video, it was a rap.
I remember that video playing on MTV. Even, I mean, obviously it would have been a little bit later than when it was initially released, because I was like a year old when it was released.
Oh, shut the hell up! That video, it was the first time I ever not physically, but the first time I've ever seen what Aerosmith looks like.
Oh,
and I
gotcha.
thought Steven Tyler was a damn madman. I was like, this guy done lost his damn mind. Come find out he's like just a little short, skinny guy.
You know what's interesting is I like the way he does the chorus. I like the vocals of the chorus of the Run DMC version better. Than the original. I would love to hear, and maybe someone's done this, splicing his chorus from the Run DMC version into the original. I don't know.
Oh, that sounds.
Yeah.
Well, I think you could do it. You got talent. And you kind of look like Rick Rubin. So
I don't have nearly the same beard as Rick Rubin.
That is pretty epic. Yeah. The 1987 Aerosmith song was born when Steven Tyler and the band were taking a break from a recording session. They were partying in a New York nightclub and spotted a lady at the end of the bar with an enormous head of blonde hair. When the lady turned around, it was Vince Neil, the singer from Motley Crue. They went back to the studio and finished a song called Cruisin' With My Lady with new lyrics.
Seriously,
it was started out as Cruising with My Lady. Yep.
And that's funny that we mentioned that because we did the Money for Nothing episode, which was supposedly about Nikki Sixx.
Yeah.
And so it's funny that we mentioned Motley Crue again.
Which is funny because if you ever saw Vince Neil now, you'd be like, really?
I saw him on. This was probably.
No, I mean physically standing in front of him. If you ever saw him now, you're like, really? This guy used to look like a girl.
Well,
back in the day, we were all in better shape, though.
I've seen the pictures of him from the '80s, and then I've seen him on what was it, The Surreal Life. He looked rough even then.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Last one I got is Steven Tyler's rushed his dog, a 2-year-old Labradoodle named Joe, to a Beverly Hills animal clinic. The poor pup couldn't stop throwing up, so a veterinarian did an x-ray to determine the problem. The dog was rushed into surgery where the culprit of the dog's gastrointestinal discomfort was revealed. He had eaten 2 of Tyler's signature long scarves made out of silk that he wears and ties around the microphone stands during the performance. The dog made a full recovery.
That's funny.
So, all right, y'all, that's my story, and I'm sticking to it. We're going to take a quick break, and Big John's going to be right back.
All right.
Hey, friends, this is Mary from the Mary Movement Podcast. We tell true stories that will inspire, encourage, and warm your heart. So join the movement at themarymovement.com.
All right, and we're back. So before we get started today, there was one thing I did want to mention. Back in, I think it was February or March, we had a guest on the show by the name of Ollie Buckets.
Ollie was the man.
Yes, indeed. Love this kid. Great dude. Great rapper. Great artist in general.
He's a good dude. He's a really good dude.
He's just the nicest guy, and man, he's really great at what he does.
Yeah.
I mean, I seriously mean that. So he's got a new album out, a new EP. I think it's 5 or 6 songs long. Listened to it this week. Really enjoyed it. It's on unlike last time, the last EP he released that we were talking about on the show was a SoundCloud exclusive. This now actually is on pretty much everything. iTunes, Google Play Music. Google Play Music being what I used to listen to it this week. I think it's on Spotify, if I'm not mistaken, too. I mean, everything. iTunes, all that. So if you guys get a chance to check that out, go check it out. Ollie Buckets. Man, I'm not sure if the title of the album is Bung. It's BVNG. I apologize. I don't know how that's supposed to be pronounced, but go check it out for sure.
Oh, BVNG. Yeah.
Yeah. Should have asked him how to pronounce that before I said this. Now I feel kind of stupid. Whatever.
Check him out. Wow.
Listen to
I'm
it.
looking it up on iTunes right now.
It's great, dude. It's a really great album, just like the last one. I highly recommend it to everyone. And not just because he's a good dude, because it's good music, period. Definitely should check it out. So,
I got to tell you, man, the experience I've had with rappers in the past, I would say a vast majority of them have left a bad taste in my mouth.
Oh, really?
But
Gotcha.
I really like him.
Yeah,
as a person. I really like him.
absolutely. He was a great guest. I'd love to have him back on.
Yeah, I could talk to him for hours.
Dude, right? Yeah, that was fun.
We might actually have him back.
He and I briefly talked about it the other day. It was on Thanksgiving. He came over for a little bit, so it was good to see him. I hadn't talked to him in a little bit, so
that's cool.
That was really cool. Yeah. So yeah, he definitely needs to be on here again. We'll set that up for the near future.
Right
on. All right, so today, there have been a lot of artists we've talked about that I'm sure at least some of our listeners haven't really heard of, and there have been a lot of bands I've talked about I'm sure that a lot of people hadn't heard of. But
yeah, to say the least.
I guarantee there isn't anyone out here who hasn't heard this song, whether they recognize it or not. Taking Care of Business has been in, oh my God, so many shows, movies, commercials.
Yeah, it was Office Max or Office Depot.
Somebody used it back in the 90s, I think it was. Some commercial, it was on TV all the freaking time, just nonstop. So, because of that, it's kind of one of the few bands, really, from the 70s that I knew of before I went through a big classic rock phase early in college. I can remember my parents buying a lot of greatest hits albums from bands like the Eagles, Queen, Heart, Stevie Ray Vaughan, AC/DC, the live album they put out in '95.
Yeah.
All of those, and Bachman-Turner Overdrive was one of those bands that had a greatest hits.
Classic, man. Those guys rock.
And I can remember one of our family friends, a friend of them, once jokingly referring to them as Bachman-Turner Overweight, which I thought was funny, but. No, and I mentioned in your topic there that we kind of tied together actually a little bit this week, because you mentioned the Guess Who, and Randy Bachman, of course, played guitar for the Guess Who as well. So that's how. And ironically, this song started off life as a Guess Who song.
Oh, is that right?
Yeah, I didn't know that until I started digging into this a little bit. So. This started life as a Guess Who song, but obviously didn't become a song until Bachman-Turner Overdrive. And according to Randy, he kind of improvised it. Something about something about Frank, their singer Frank Turner, couldn't remember a certain song, and so he just played this and made up the lyrics. Some of the lyrics on the spot. He wrote the lyrics fully, their final version later.
Right.
But so I came across this subject several months ago. Went on a binge of kind of looking for potential stories and keeping them in this Google Keep note so I can find them whenever I'm scrambling at the last minute for ideas. So, basically, the shortened version of this story is that Bachman-Turner Overdrive were recording the song in the studio, and a pizza delivery guy claimed it needed a, quote, boogie-woogie piano part. He sat down, recorded it in one take, then left, never to be heard of again. Kind of reminds me of those terrible chain emails with the obviously bullshit stories.
Yeah.
That student's name, Albert Einstein. You know what I'm talking about. Yeah. So, but the story gets really interesting right off the bat because we have supposed confirmation of this myth from the titular Bachman, Randy Bachman, the lead guitarist of Bachman-Turner Overdrive, and before that, the Guess Who. He's actually claimed this story was true in several interviews over the years. I found one from 2002, an interview he did with a Canadian news anchor by the name of Peter Mansbridge. And basically he tells this long story, kind of rambling story about some pizza delivery guy shows up to the studio, and and this part's true actually, in the studio there with them in another adjacent room was Steve Miller, who was recording whatever album had Fly Like an Eagle on it.
Yeah, I remember hearing about that. Yeah.
And War. Also, I don't know if it was the album with Lowrider or not. I'm not sure what the time frame is here. So, guy tries to deliver pizza to them. Like, hey, we didn't order pizza. Goes and checks with the other residents there, or the other bands who were also sharing studio space. comes back a little bit later, hears them playing the song back. He's like, hey guys, I can throw down a piano part on that real quick. Records it, leaves, and then they're discussing it amongst themselves. Like, okay, we got to pay this guy if we're going to put his part on this album, but we don't know the guy's name. We didn't get it. So they end up just turning it down in the mix, because the next day or two, the head of their record label flew into town to listen to the song, or to listen to the songs that they had recorded so far, to try to find something to put on the radio, trying to find a single.
Right.
And he hears that song. He's like, oh, okay, this is pretty decent. And then Randy turns the fader up on the piano track, and the exec freaks out, like, oh yeah, we gotta put this out as the single.
Right.
So they're like, oh shit, we gotta find it.
Right.
What this guy's name is. So they split the phone book in half. I think it was Randy and Frank. Could have been Randy's brother Robbie, who played drums. But they're like, okay, you take A through M, and I'll take N through Z, and they just started calling every pizza place.
Oh wow.
In the phone book, because they asked Steve Miller where they ordered pizza from. And he's like, dude, we order pizza every night. Good luck. Here's a phone book. Literally.
Right.
Is what he's saying here. So they go through it. They finally find it. He asks the guy if he can get the delivery boy's phone number, this guy who played piano. The owner says, no, but I'll send him out to you if you order a pizza.
Oh, right on.
And so the guy comes back. They find out his name, guy by the name of Norman Durkee, I believe was the name.
I think you're right. That sounds familiar.
Because he did get the right name. Yeah, Norman Durkee. Which is actually the guy who's credited on the track. So that kind of adds a little bit of a wrinkle to the story here. So they find him, they credit him, life goes on. So again, the pianist got the name. He got the name right, but the story that same year in 2002, his brother, like I mentioned, Robbie, directly contradicted that story in a separate interview. His version of the story was basically, it refutes Randy's version. Says there was a guy in the next studio over with Steve Miller who heard the song and suggested it could use a piano part. The pizza portion of Randy's story, it sounds like, came from the fact that, according to Robbie, the piano player came in, wrote down the chord progression on a pizza box.
Oh.
And then played the song in one take, and he was joking with the guys, like, how long is the song? 5 minutes. Oh, okay, I've got 6.
Right.
So he records it in one take. They send him a check for the royalties, his portion. No, it was for $90. That's what they said, and he gives them his business card. So just like Randy, this guy gets the player's name right again, and further adds that he was the musical director for Bette Midler and Barry Manilow at the time.
Oh wow!
This Norman Durkee guy, and mentions this is the first mention that he's credited on the album. The definitive version of the story, though, as far as I can tell, seems to come from Norman Durkee himself. Okay, because I mean, this is the guy whose life was actually affected,
right?
Here, so it seems that he would probably have the most clear version of things,
sure.
So to speak. So in 2010, Randy Bachman and Fred Turner, being the Turner and Bachman-Turner Overdrive, did an interview with a radio station KZOK out of Seattle, and Norman calls in to join in on the interview. And so he basically says, hey, so the Bachman-Turner Overdrive guys, they eat a lot of pizza. They get confused with this stuff. They don't get. He specifically mentions that they don't get high.
Right.
So like trying to dispel the myth that maybe they were just too messed up to remember. He said they wanted piano on the song, and at the time the guy was Norman Durkee was working across the hall in the studio where they were at, and he was writing commercial jingles.
Oh wow, no kidding.
So yeah. So he was like, okay, whatever, you guys want a piano part for this? They came to ask him about doing it, and so he agrees to do it after a little bit of coercing by one of the other engineers in the studio there, and so he goes over to the studio and he talks to the engineer and gets this going, gets this recorded in one take, just like the other stories say, and he asks only payment for just the labor union minimum, which was $90.
Right.
And so years later, one of the Allman Brothers is like, man, you really got fucked on that deal.
The biggest song they ever had.
And he gave him a couple $1,000s. He doesn't say which Allman Brothers. He just said one of the Allman Brothers. So the legend isn't true, clearly, but
Right.
we can at least figure out where some of the elements
It's a good story,
of the
though.
rumor came from. Yeah, it was a fun one to look into.
That's cool.
So,
That's cool. That's some guys that I've never had any run-ins with, but God, man, this.
I wonder if they're still around. I'm sure they're still like doing some sort of victory lap tours. You know
yeah, the
like
last tour before I die tour. That's what we always call it.
Yeah.
I don't know if I'm kind of looking it up right now. They're Canadians, so they got good health care. Randy Bachman, I want to say he's still around.
Is he? Okay.
Could be.
I know his son was. I think it was his son.
Yeah, he's 74, still kicking.
Wow. His son kind of had one big hit back in the late 90s.
His son did?
I think it was his son. It was either his son or his brother's son, Tyler Bachman. It was a really bad, like, pop radio hit. It's just kind of generic.
Kind of riding on coattails type of thing?
Yeah, not really. Just I don't know.
Well, Fred Turner and Randy
Care for
Bachman are still around.
Okay.
As far as the other guys, I don't know. But, wow, that's a good story.
Yeah, it was a fun one to look up.
And, those are one of those bands that you never really hear anything about them.
Yeah,
like
that's
there's
true.
a lot of stories about Aerosmith. There's a lot of stories about, Guns N' Roses.
Oh,
and,
yeah.
But these guys, you never, at least I didn't. Of course, that was my generation.
I mean,
and
they were, and this isn't necessarily an insult to them. They were career musicians. They treated it as a job, and they did it well. I mean, I'm not necessarily a huge fan of some of their songs, but I can appreciate them for what they are.
Oh, absolutely. Classic songs. I mean, geez. I'm looking up some of their stuff right now.
Mm-hmm.
God, the albums. Wow.
I couldn't say anything about specific albums. I've only ever just heard.
Well, I couldn't
Singles.
before this. I couldn't tell you one off the top of my head. But now, Street Action, Rock and Roll Nights. I mean, these are relatively big. Wow.
Some of that era of rock just isn't my thing like that. And American Grand Funk Railroad, those guys.
Yeah, and the band, that one that they had.
I don't mind the band too much. They're not.
What is that one that the drummer used to sing the night they brought Old
Dixie Down.
Yeah, God darn, that's a good song. Man. But it
like
seemed
the band.
all those, a vast majority of those bands back then, these really talented people.
Oh, no doubt, absolutely.
Very little. I mean, you didn't have anything in the way of like auto tune and
No, of course
digital this and all that.
They
stuff.
could do very little editing in the studio. Really, with working with tape is a bitch.
Oh yeah,
to do that. They could punch in and throw in little things, but it's a lot easier to overproduce a song these days.
Oh,
whereas
yeah.
back then, I mean, you had to rely on good old fashioned playing it all right the first fucking
Yeah.
time. You know what I'm saying? I mean,
Well, and back then, like the way that the record industry was back then, the labels were king.
Yes,
and
very much so.
they had the bands by the short hairs.
Yeah.
And there wasn't nothing they could do about it. But now you got these cats that they're making music on their laptop in their mom's basement.
Hell, I mean, I record everything on my laptop in my basement.
Yeah, right. Difference is it's your basement,
My
bro.
basement, yeah.
Right. But now it's so easy to you get these cats that they got this big dream of I want to make beats and I want to do that. Well, hell, you got this cool app on your phone and all of a sudden you're a musician. Jesus
Yeah, a lot more
Christ.
goes into it than that. But I mean, there's by the same token, it's now easier for a good artist to get heard. And that's how I look at it too. It's a little bit easier for that reason. You don't have to be beholden to a studio.
Well, and it's funny because like whenever I'm researching things for material for our podcast, I'll go through music news.
Yeah.
And it's so rare nowadays that I run across a news article of artists that I recognize.
Oh, yeah.
There's so many artists that's out there. And what's the one guy that just passed away, had the tattoo over his right
Lil
eyebrow?
Peep.
Yeah. Never heard of that guy until he died.
Only reason I'd heard of him was from the Hip Hop Heads subreddit. I'd seen him mentioned. I've never heard a single song of his. To this day, I still haven't heard.
Yeah, I've never heard of the guy until he passed away, and there's like a lot of them that are on the, they're making these big statements. in news articles like, well, there's a meaning behind this song and there was this one verse that I did, and wait till we go on tour, and this is going to be different than any other tour. And I'm like, who are you? Who are you? I know roadies that have more talent than you, but well, whatever. I mean, it is what it is.
It's a double-edged sword. The availability of studio equipment. It is a double-edged sword.
No, you're right. But I think the more availability, you have people like me that have, borderline no talent, zero talent, very little drive, but they have this, they like doing this. Well, just because you like doing that doesn't mean you're good at it,
That's also true.
I like doing a lot of things that I'm not good at, just like doing it, Doesn't mean I should do it professionally,
I do hear you there. Completely agree with that.
The one thing I wanted to say before we got done was, did you have anything else on that?
No.
Okay.
Actually, I was done.
Last night, me and my buddy Rod went down to Tironi's on Main Street in Evansville, Indiana. And I tell you what, we had the best time. And I wish I would have caught that brother's name, but they got the biggest Irishman I have ever met in my life. That's the bartender down there. And, man, we had a great time last night. And big shout out to y'all. Y'all did a great job last night. And, I mean, we just walked in. We didn't tell them who we were or what we were doing. No. But, I mean, we sat at the bar. I mean, they treated us like celebrities.
Tironi's is awesome. I love that place.
Oh, man, the food, the drinks. Yeah, oh, my God.
Absolutely.
Look, I'm a rum guy, and I have never had that much gin in my life. Holy cow.
I do like gin. I do like good gin. Tanqueray is pretty solid.
I don't even know what... well, it's that damn app that you told me to download.
Mixologist? Yeah, dude.
Man, that's like a to-do list for me. Jeez.
I do like their beer a whole lot. I pointed out to Randy before we started, I've got 2 empty growlers on top of my fridge that once contained beer. From
many moons ago.
Yeah, I do love their beer. It's great stuff, and their pizza is great too. And I'm not a big thin crust guy. I usually get hand tossed when I get pizza, but I do like their thin crust.
Yeah, man, it was that nice thin cracker crust. Yeah. Man, it was good stuff. And then Rod had some kind of beer that. Mm-hmm. Dear God, man, it looks.
I can't think of the name of that.
It looks like cleaning fluid after you cleaned out something.
I'm a big fan of their Thunderbolt Red.
Yeah, he had one of those.
My wife loves I think it's called Honey Blonde. I think is what it's called.
They gave the beer, really the one I'm talking about, and one of those looked like a brandy snifter almost.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
God, the bubbles were brown.
There are very specific types of glassware that certain beers are supposed to be served in.
Look, I'm envious of guys that are into that. I'm just not into it. I wish I liked beer. Anybody that knows me tell you, I'll say the same thing. I wish I liked it.
It took me a very long time to develop a taste for beer, but I do genuinely love beer, I say as I sip my Red Hook ESB.
Now, see, it's funny because you talk about beer the way Joe Rogan talks about jujitsu. Like being choked out and things like that. Yeah, okay, it sucks being choked out. No, being choked out is like a life-changing moment. That is like something that you will think differently after being choked out. Yeah. And he has it done all the time. See, you can't compare jujitsu to, but y'all talk about the same, in the same light,
Right.
So anyway, what the hell? Let's bring it home, brother.
All right, guys. Well, hey, as always, if you have an urban myth or legend about the music industry that you would like to hear us talk about, feel free to send it to us. You can reach us on social media, Facebook at Tall Tales in Music Mythology. You can find us on Twitter at T2M2 Podcast, or you can email us at hosts, HOSTS, at T2M2.org.
And you can find out more information about the Smarts Project at thesmartsproject.com. And our complaint department is open 24 hours a day, 7 days a week at Randy at thesmartsproject.com. And now more than ever, be kind to each other. Tell your kids you love them each and every day. Never be a myth.
Always be a legend.
Love you. Bye.
Bye.